Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fulman. This week, we are going back to Illinois in the second week of Candidate Month 2.0, and we are going to be talking to a candidate from Illinois' 5th District. Now, the 5th District touches parts kind of at the heart of the city. If you're familiar with the city of Chicago, it includes places like Lincoln Park, but also places out in the suburbs such as Arlington Heights. It's a very interesting district that truly those places couldn't be more different from each other, but also so similar. Now, I met this candidate, whose name is Matt Conroy, at an event for Kevin Ryan, and if that name sounds familiar, that would be because I had him on Current Affairs Unfiltered back in October, and Matt was there, and he gave a short speech, and I was so intrigued by what he had to say that I sent him an email afterwards and said, do you want to come on? And Matt has been so gracious through all of this. He is truly a candidate that is so hungry for change, as are so many of the people that I have on, but he has a message of a more inclusive, more well-rounded America that I think a lot of people can get behind. And I love talking to people that are running against incumbents. And when people are talking about their frustration with the incumbent that they're running against, it's much of the same story every single time, which is incredibly frustrating. But Matt has a plan, Matt has a vision, and I truly hope that he can win and pull this out. But first, more about Matt. Matt Conroy is a lifelong advocate for putting people first, especially those often left without a voice. Born and raised in Brooklyn, he lost his father in the 9/11 attacks, an experience that shaped his values of empathy, perseverance, and service. His mother raised 4 children on her own, instilling the responsibility that still guides him today. At Xavier High School, Matt embraced the call to be a man for others, a mindset that strengthened during a service trip to Tijuana with Habitat for Humanity. He later studied economics at Northeastern University, gaining a deeper understanding of how policy affects everyday lives. Over the past decade, Matt has worked across manufacturing, real estate, tech, and financial services in cities from Boston to Los Angeles to Chicago. These experiences have broadened his perspective on the challenges facing communities across the country. Outside the campaign, he loves playing hockey, baseball, exploring the city, and hunting for Chicago's best restaurant. Today, he's running for Congress to fight for working families and push for a more compassionate, inclusive America. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Matt Conroy. Matt, thank you so much for being here. It is great to have you on.
Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me on, Paige.
Of course. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, if you will. You are running against an incumbent that has been there for quite some time. And that's never an easy thing to do. What made you decide that this district that you're in deserves a change in leadership?
Yeah, so it's not just, so aside from living in a district, I don't think the challenges that face my district are unique. So when you look at the Democratic Party, in my opinion, they're stuck in the mud. They're afraid to take on bold ideas. And that's when typically what happens when you have career compromise, centrist politicians, self-described centrist Mike Quigley, that quite frankly are afraid to even take chances or present anything bold because they're quite frankly scared of failing and scared of losing their next election. So in a safe blue district like mine, that's a 70-30 Democratic district, quite frankly, the elected representative for this district should be a voice of the people and should be leading on all the issues that need to be addressed, not just for here, but across the country. He should be a leading voice on universal health care, universal child care, paid family leave, fixing Social Security that we know is going bankrupt in 9 years. Where is he? Nowhere. He's talking about Ukraine. He's talking about, government accountability. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, these are things that absolutely need to be addressed. But quite frankly, if you do not address people's lives, everyday lives, nothing is ever going to get better. So when you continue to look at the fact that he's been in office since 2009, he's represented this district since then, he's not leading from the front on any of these issues. He supports Israel's genocide in Gaza, which is absolutely abhorrent. He does not take, like I said, any real stances on any issues. And quite frankly, that's the problem with the Democratic Party, is they are made up of career politicians who will not give you a direct answer. For example, I ask, and I actually posted a TikTok about this a couple months ago, but basically like kind of letting voters know like, hey, there are going to be choices on the ballot this year for your primary. Ask them, do you think Hakeem Jeffries should be the next leader of the Democratic Party? And if as a voter, like I absolutely think he should not. So like right then, if one of the candidates said that they think he would, that kind of is disqualifying, or I'm going to deduct a point from, his or her total for voting for them.
Right.
These are things that like that you have to ask them because quite frankly, Mike Quigley and the rest of the Democratic Party will not give you a yes or no answer on that. A few of them will, like Ro Khanna calling out Chuck Schumer. Maybe he would also call out Hakeem Jeffries. I doubt that. But like these are the stances that the party needs to take because we're at a crossroads. And this district deserves better representation than what they've had.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because Democrats don't like to put anybody in a position of power unless they are in a safe blue district. But these people that are in safe blue districts, like you said, they're not leading. They're not taking the party to the next place that it's going to
Correct.
evolve into.
Yeah, that's the problem when you look at the Democratic Party and you look at big money in politics. A lot of the elected officials will say some of the right things and they'll do the political theater. They'll show up at local town events, they'll do food drives, and which again are great things to do, and I commend them for doing that, but that is political theater. It's how are you also going to make our lives better on a daily basis? And quite frankly, they're not going to be the ones who challenge the establishment because they are the establishment. They're the ones who take donations from airlines that lobby against high-speed rail, from banks, Wall Street, financial institutions that charge us ATM fees, junk fees, excessive fees just to get our money out of the ATM each and every week. And you go down the list, the defense contractors who continue to fund endless wars, who continue to push to continue the genocide in Gaza. And you just go down the list. They're not going to change the status quo because
Right.
they're receiving money from the corporations, PACs, and lobbyists that benefit from the status quo. So that is why when a voter shows up to the polls, the most important thing they can look at is who is funding each candidate. If someone is funded by 100% grassroots, individuals, local organizations, local community, even outside the district, and they're talking about issues that quite frankly are going to make your lives better, that is the type of candidate that you should be voting for. Not someone who's been in office for 15, 20, 25 years who says that they're going to solve these issues, but yet in the time that they've been in office, they haven't. And when you look at who they're funded by, it's all the companies that continue to screw us over every single step of the way.
Right. Absolutely. So before politics, you worked in manufacturing, real estate, tech, which are career paths that aren't typically the run up into being an elected official.
Sure.
What moment or experiences from that kind of career that you've had convinced you to actually run for Congress?
Yeah, so there's no job requirement to actually have sat in public office before, and I want people to understand that because if when you show up to the voting booth and you're looking at the candidates and you're looking for people who have experience, you're not really looking for change. You're kind of just looking for someone to continue in there. So
listen, I'm not knocking you. I understand. It's a valiant fight. It's so many candidates come from some sort of like a lawyer or some sort of local organizing background. Like this is a very interesting to go from a more corporate focused career path and being like, screw it, I'm going to run for office. Love it, but I'd love to know why.
Yeah, so when you look at I've already talked about how people are struggling to pay their bills. They're struggling to afford childcare. It's over $3,000 a month in this district. I'm 37 years old. Like I'm at the point in my life where I'm considering, do I want to start a family? And quite frankly, I can't afford it. And that's something that I never, ever thought. I grew up in a family of 4. I have 3 younger sisters. My mother was able to stay home as a full-time stay-at-home mom. Times have changed. And I don't think that the people who are representing our districts across the country realize that. They've been in comfy 6-figure jobs with government benefits and career pensions forever. And they are complacent and asleep at the wheel. And they do not realize the struggle that a lot of people are feeling on a regular basis. What I felt really why I wanted to get involved is because at some point, someone has to stand up and say, hey, man, this isn't working. Enough is enough. And you have to stop thinking about your own political future, your own career, and put the people in your district ahead of you. And quite frankly, we do not have enough of that. And in my mind, we don't really have any of that because everyone's always thinking about how can they look at how they're going to be for their next office? Mike Quigley, how can I run for mayor? That's the worst kept secret in Chicago right now is that he's running for mayor. So he can't represent the people of this district, fight for the things that quite frankly we need while turning around and going to run in a mayoral election in the 3rd largest media market in the country. And we need people who are saying, hey, I'm going to fight for you. I may or may not win. I may not sit in office for 25, 30 years. And quite frankly, I don't want to. I think that's ridiculous because after a certain amount of time, you lose touch with people. If you're an elected official in Congress, like you're dealing with world leaders, you're dealing with people from different countries, you're dealing with these billion-dollar industries, now trillion-dollar industries like Eli Lilly and other companies. Like that's not normal. Like I understand that. And after so long of being in that world, your brain gets warped and you think that's normal, but it's not. And we need people to focus on, making groceries cheaper, making housing more affordable, fixing mass transit in Chicago around the country, helping address climate change, stop spending money on forever wars and investing them back in our communities and realizing that our elected officials are not going to do it. And quite frankly, I've realized now at this point in my life, you cannot wait for someone to be the change that you want to see in the community. You have to make it happen.
Right. No, absolutely. There was a brief moment, and I live in the Ninth District, and there was a brief moment like right before Jan Schakowsky retired where I was like, oh my God, do I have to do it? Am I going to have to be the one to run? Luckily, nobody would have wanted to see that. But so many good people threw their hat in the ring, and I was like, phew, like I can.
Don't beat yourself down. Because we're our hardest critic. And I'm learning that now as I run for office. Like there's so much time that, when you're out campaigning, you're out canvassing for signatures, door knocking, just meeting people, like they're not like no one is as hard on you as you are. So don't sell yourself short.
Right. And I said it to another candidate, that Patrick Hanley. I was talking to him and I was like, who's running for the state Senate district, 9th district in Illinois. And I said, for the longest time, I always felt like in order to run for office, you kind of had to be a little bit of a narcissist. Like there's some part of you that has to think like, I'm the only one that can do this. This year, however, with the candidates that I've been speaking to, the candidates that I've found on social media, I'm not getting that same vibe that like people are doing this because they think they're the best and they're the only one that can solve this problem. It's a lot of people that are just so angry and upset and are like, I want to change this. Not thinking like I'm the only one that can do this, but thinking like things need to change. And that's a great thing to me.
Yeah, look, I mean, change is scary, but we have to change to move forward. Like we have to progress forward in whatever it is that we're trying to solve. Or quite frankly, America is going to continue to fall behind because we are falling behind. Like you look at China. China's built 25,000 miles of high-speed rail since 2008. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in clean energy and EV while Trump and the administration is rolling them back. Like they are positioning themselves to be the player in the world stage for the 21st century. And we are trying to go back to a 20th century mindset that, quite frankly, is only going to really lead to our downfall. So we have to adapt for the future and realizing that the same people who got us into this mess are not going to be the ones who got us out. And I'm seeing that the same thing you're seeing too. Like Dylan Blaha in the 13th district, Kevin Ryan running for U.S. Senate. Like there's a whole list of, and that's just local. Like there's a whole list of candidates. Elijah Manley down in Florida. Like there's a lot of candidates across the board who want change and are speaking to the frustration of voters across the country.
Right. And on the China high-speed rail, I did ride one of their high-speed rails back in 2014, and let me tell you, I was astonished. And I was more astonished that the locals were getting on this train and riding it like it was nothing. Yeah. It shouldn't be that way. We should not be astonished by high-speed rail.
It's so I was fortunate enough to ride the Shinkansen in Japan back 2005 to 2009-ish. My uncle lived there, so we went to visit him. And it's incredible because you're able to basically go, several hundred miles, like, Boston to DC in, we'll call it 2.5, 3 hours.
I literally traversed the whole country like overnight.
It's part of, it's part of their daily lives for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The craziest part is the Japanese train engineers came to America in the early 20th century to study our rails because we had the most expansive rail car network in the entire world. They went above and beyond and did a full bullet train while we ripped out rails in favor of the automobiles, which exacerbated climate change and, quite frankly, made congestion and traffic and our daily lives way, way worse. You look at people who commute by car to work, they're often the most miserable people. And I was one of them for a while. Yeah. And, these are again the things. If we're not trying to make the situation and daily lives of the people in our district and in the country better, we're failing as elected officials.
Right. So challenging an establishment figure comes with some sort of risk to the personal, the political. What has been the biggest surprise about the process of challenging an incumbent, either negative or positive, up to you how you want to take that so far?
So the biggest surprise has been the biggest surprise so far for me has been, quite frankly, seeing how excited people are for change. It's something that I've always wanted was change. I've always wanted to progress forward. I've always wanted, the Democratic Party to be a party for working people and address some of the issues that we've already talked about. And as you go out and you talk to people who are just out shopping at the same farmers markets, the grocery stores that are walking down, Halsted Street and other, commercial corridors here in the district, they want change. And as I go out to the suburbs, like I went to Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect, a couple of the ones out there, they're just really sick and tired of the same elected officials, number one, not addressing their issues, but number two, it feels like they're not doing anything to bring us closer together. Because when I was out, like, I completely despise Donald Trump and everything that the Republican Party stands for, like raining terror on our communities. But when I'm actually out there and I'm talking to people who identify as Republicans, they also are appalled at, ICE's raining terror on our communities and what Donald Trump is doing and, implementing tariffs that quite frankly make no economic sense. And they just want to get it to a place where, like we said, we have different ways that we want to approach the economy, different ways that we want to approach the immigration, but we want to see it where we're working together and we're making their lives better, making the people and making Democratic voters' lives better. The parties that are in elected office are drawing us apart because hyperpartisan fuels donations, and quite frankly, it keeps them in office. And that's what really has to change. So seeing and getting out and talking to people and just realizing that people just want something different. They want something better. They
Right.
feel like they're entitled to better. And they are. And they need to know that. And there are going to be options on the ballot this year for the first time in a while for them to elect a better representative for this district.
Right. Right. That's one of the things that makes me so excited is the amount of people that are challenging incumbents that have sat there for so long. Like that, maybe I just wasn't paying attention in previous years, but it feels
Yeah.
like this year there are so many more. And it's such a shame that I think it was David Hogg who was at the DNC and was like, I'm going to fund candidates running against incumbents. And they immediately booted him. And
Yeah.
still people were like, nope, that's actually exactly what we wanted to do and are now running
Yeah.
against these incumbents.
Yeah, again, it just goes to show the Democratic establishment and the Democratic
Right.
Party, DNC, whatever other organization you want to lump in there, is just completely out of touch with people. And
Right.
they're not talking to the regular people. So I mentioned earlier about how, like, when you're in, elected official in Congress or the Senate, if you're there for 15 years, like, you're living a not normal life. The same goes for a lot of these consultants and the people within the DNC. Like, they're not out talking to people on a regular basis who are struggling to pay their electric bill, pay their car payment, put gas in
Right.
their car, food on the table. They're kind of in that same DC bubble. And that's really why people are like, oh, like things are all rosy for you there. We see like senators like dining together. Like Lindsey Graham said some terrible things about Kamala Harris. And then earlier this week or last week at Dick Cheney's funeral, they're pictured together, all chummy, talking to each other. And it's just like,
Right.
oh, it's just one big party and we're all on the outside. And that's why people want change. We don't want to be excluded from the party. We want to be able to invite everyone to the party. And that's one of the things that really, I think, is the change that, these challenger candidates are looking for. It's like, hey, we
Right.
need to make our politics more inclusive so people feel like their voice is heard, so they feel like they're not forgotten, and they feel like they can be happy and proud of their representative, which is few and far between, quite frankly, in today.
Right. Absolutely. So you went to a Jesuit high school,
I
and
did.
I am a big fan of the Jesuits. I also went to a Jesuit high school. The Jesuits have a saying. Was yours an all boys school?
It was an all
Okay,
boys.
so
Yeah.
your saying was be a man for others. Our saying was be a man or woman
Hmm.
for others.
Yeah.
But that is a motto that has inspired your path into service. And That's one that I like a lot. I love the Be a Man or Woman for Others, and I love Cura Personalis, all those fun little
Yeah.
slogans. But how does that principle of being a man for others continue to guide your work in running for office?
I think that's the number one thing that you have to be when you're running for office, because you can't be a a, a man for or a woman for yourself, because then that is how, if you're lucky enough to win, that you just end up going down that kind of egotistical. It's a perfect example. Probably Ted Cruz, always been out for himself. Like, look at him. He's just a complete, you know,
Right.
scumbag is the easiest way to put it. And I mean, the number one example, Texas was undergoing a once in a lifetime ice snow freeze snap, and he was hopping on a plane to Cancun, ditching his constituents. Like, dude, you were elected to represent the people of that state. That is the one time you have to be there on the phone, calling whoever you can to ensure that your constituents are not freezing to
Right.
death, that they can get some resources, whether it be food, water, canned goods, anything, blankets, anything to help them survive. So when I'm trying to run for office, like, I really am trying to run because I realize that there are things that I'm upset with, and I want to change for the better. And I know that there are a lot of people who are in a position that are struggling to pay their bills, struggling to pay their electricity, struggling to pay. And as an elected official, that has to be your number one job. The job
Right.
of government is not to make people's lives more difficult, it's to make it better, just a little bit better. And that can be done through incremental changes, such as helping fund Social Security to ensure that in 9 years, you know, 350 million Americans do not have their benefits cut. It can
Right.
mean passing, universal health care to ensure that 550,000 Americans do not file for bankruptcy each year due to medical debt, or addressing the 100 million that have medical debt currently. Like, these are things that, quite frankly, an overwhelming majority of Republicans, Democrats, Independents want the government to address, and our elected officials refuse to do it. And this is where kind of the career politician, or me not being one, kind of gets in. Is a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of elected officials on the local level, probably feel the same way, that they want our federal government to do more, but they're afraid to speak up or even challenge Mike Quigley and other members of the establishment, because it could ruin their potential political future. Well, in my mind, as someone who has had a political past, like, hey man, you have to, like, can't be afraid to fail. You have to stand up for something at some point, and you have to take a stance to truly represent the people of this district and fight for the things that they want. And we just don't have that leadership to do it. And so by
Right.
being able to try to solve their issues by putting a little bit of self-sacrifice first, like, that's the biggest thing. The number one example I'll give is, like, I still play sports. I still play in hockey. I still play baseball. Like, at some point when I'm playing hockey, I got to block shots. I'm 37 years old, man. Those hurt. Like, I don't want to wake up the next day with a black and blue ankle, but, like, you got to do it. We're a team at the end of the day. And, like,
Right.
that's how, unfortunately, our elected officials don't view us as part of that team. So, that's kind of how I'm running, and how I would be a representative for this district.
Right. Absolutely. So let's move on to some of your policies. You've talked about getting big money and corporate influence out of politics. That is also an
Hmm.
issue that I have been hammering on this podcast for
Yeah.
months, after the first guest I had on that said, like, everything is tied to this. I was like, oh, we're going all in on this. And it
Yeah.
seems to be an issue that has resonated a lot with people and also candidates. I
Sure.
want to say 9 times out of 10, the candidates that I'm interviewing have this as part of their platform. But what concrete steps would you take to make that happen? And how do you keep reform from getting watered down the way it has in the past, and, by those same interests that taking it out would threaten?
Sure. So whoever said that, by the way, is 100% correct, because everything is connected to politics. So first off, I would love to see, like, let me just give you kind of my stance. I would love to see all corporate, all PAC, all lobbyist money completely banned from politics. And you look at the states like Montana, they're actually trying to pass their own reforms on a state level to basically kind of overturn Citizens United within the state. They basically say, hey, our our state constitution gives corporations not a voice, not money to influence elections. you get the right to exist and conduct business. You get the right to sell goods. You get the right to sell services. Whatever your business is, that's what you get. And they're doing that. So I think locally, I think that Democrats, especially in states like Illinois, we have a super, we have the trifecta. We need to pass similar legislation to kind of get money out here. And once we start to do it on a state level, I think there'll be a little bit more of a bigger push on the federal level. Now, what can we do federally? To be quite honest, this is a very, very uphill battle because some people, again, will say the right thing. But if you look under the hood, you look at their donations, if they accept a single dollar of corporate money, PAC money, lobbyist money, they're not going to fight for that change because they're the ones who are benefiting from it. And that's the number one thing. So like if this is your biggest issue, because this is how you truly can help address climate change, because then you can reduce the amount of lobbying and influence that airlines, polluters can put in, against additional environmental regulations. So we need to enforce some of the rules that are already on the books. We need to limit soft dollar donations. So when you think of like the blitzes right before an election, and you see like paid for by, friends of Kamala or friends of Trump, like these third party that are not, like
Right.
we need to limit the amount of money that can be spent on those. We need better reporting. We need to increase the FEC's budget. We actually need to refer some cases to the DOJ. Like these laws are on the books. Congress is just not enforcing it. And I think that's an easy thing to sell to the American people that can start to kind of get that first domino to fall. And then eventually you can get to the bigger example of removing money out of politics, overturning Citizens United, passing constitutional amendments. Like these are some things that if we can get state buy-in, if we can get Congress to enforce some of the rules on the books, that makes it a whole lot easier than going for, the touchdown pass from your own 5-yard line.
Right. Couple things. Starting at the state level is a very interesting point. Also, from my episode with Patrick Hanley, he said we get the most interesting and progressive policies at the state level, which is usually what causes change to happen at the federal level. And I had never thought about that before, but he made a good point. And now that you're saying it, like I agree. I think the way to get this to make change at the federal level, if we don't want to go Kevin Ryan's route of passing a whole new amendment, like the way to do that is to start at the state level.
By the way, I would gladly co-sponsor an amendment like day one for sure. Like I'm not saying that's not like
No,
this can
absolutely.
be an approach from both sides kind of thing. But there's roadmaps to doing it. It's just you need to have leaders who have the political courage to actually do something and, quite frankly, upset their existing donors. Mike Quigley gets 70% of his money from corporations, PACs, and lobbyists. And this is all public information on his FEC reporting. So do you really think he's going to be the one to change this system? No chance.
Right. Well, that's what the only, hate to say it to be a bad person, but the only congressional race that I'm paying like deep attention to is my own, which is the 9th district.
Fair.
But somebody, I think it was Bushra Amawala that I had on, and she had said a lot of these people, like you said, will say the right thing, but you look behind the curtain and they're all taking donations. And I went to a candidate forum and they made all the candidates like raise their hand for like the statements they agreed with. And one of the questions was, I pledged to like not take any corporate money, and every single person on that stage raised their hand. And I was like, I literally know that's not true. Like they are sitting up on that stage lying to the people right in front of them about not taking corporate money. It was the most insane thing I've ever seen.
I mean, look, this is politics. Like we get the elected officials that we allow to happen. Like the fact of the matter is, like, we get to the ballot box and, if there's an elected official, like how many times do people just vote for the incumbent because they don't pay attention to it and they don't necessarily know what their incumbent is fighting for, who they're taking money from. And that's like one of the biggest things that I encourage people to do when I'm out talking to them. Because look, I don't have the name recognition that Mike Quigley has. I understand that. He's been a representative for this district since 2009. Most people know who he is. So when I was meeting them, I would say, look, I'm not going to win your vote today. Like that's not at all. I just want you to do two things. Go to my website, read my platform, get to know a little bit more about me, see what I'm trying to fight for. And number two, go to his financials. Look at who actually funds his campaign and then compare what he does versus what he says. Because he'll potentially say the right things in certain scenarios, but he's not doing anything about it. And that's when we go down the board. And if we show up and we continue to vote for elected officials that will raise their hand and then turn around and cash their checks, what are we doing? For example,
Right.
Mike Quigley took tens of thousands of dollars in donations this year alone from companies that are actively working with ICE, active contracts with ICE. And it's like, dude, how can you protect the people of this district when you're taking money from these very companies who are profiting from it? About a month ago, they dragged the teacher out of the preschool that was in our district.
Right.
And the representative is taking money from companies working with ICE. So this is all public information. It just takes a little bit of time for people to do a little bit of research. And quite frankly, too often they don't.
Right. All right. Let's move on to affordability. Families
Sure.
in Illinois and also across the country are struggling with the cost of housing, childcare, and basic necessities. What's one policy that you think would make the biggest difference for working and middle class families right now?
So I actually think it's a good question. I think on a federal, state, and a local municipality level, if there was a coordinated effort to address housing, healthcare, transportation, mass transit, et cetera, like whatever falls under that umbrella, those three things would have the biggest impact on everyone's life because everyone needs a house, everyone needs healthcare, and everyone needs transportation, be it mass transit, buses, et cetera. So when you look at affordability, I think a very bold strategy that the country can take is to pass a national zoning registration or national zoning laws. So currently our zoning laws are super restrictive and prevent anything from getting built. For example, in Chicago, there's roughly like over 150 unique zoning ordinances. The entire country of Japan has 12. Think about that. That makes it so, yeah, that makes it so much easier to get more housing built, to get
Right.
it built quicker and get it built more affordably. Because quite frankly, a lot of the red tape that happens behind the scenes is what causes the biggest delays. Another example, the city of Chicago built some affordable housing units around the city over the past few years. And it's come out that the average cost to build it was almost $900,000 per unit, which is insane for an affordable housing unit. When you look at a private developer that builds similar specs, size, et cetera, it costs about $425,000 to $450,000. That's almost half the cost. So it'd almost be more beneficial for the city of Chicago to say, hey, you build it and we'll buy it for a 25% markup and we'll still save ourselves X amount.
Right.
So and it all just comes from a lot of red tape behind the scenes. And quite frankly, that's where we need to streamline it. So you walk up and down a lot of streets here in Chicago. Like I live in Lincoln Park, so like take Halsted for example. There's a lot of commercial spaces. You could just utilize or universally approve 4 to 5 over ones. What that means is first floor, ground level commercial, 4 to 5 stories of housing above it. Like just straight up and down any commercial quarter. Immediately increase density. You immediately get more people in the neighborhood paying taxes, helping build the city's tax base. And you also get potential new business owners, people shopping at local businesses. Like this is an easy way for us to do it. Areas around mass transit, not just in Chicago, but across the country. Legalize multifamily units on all lots within mile of mass transit. Like these are simple things. Reducing parking minimums. These are things that we can do without making massive capital investments that can make people's lives so much better, make it so much more affordable, and just improve the quality of lives for millions and millions of Americans.
Housing in Chicago is always a little bit difficult, whether you're renting or owning. It's an expensive city. My senior year of college, I lived on Armitage above the Keels. So like
Yep.
you're talking about, some units above a business, and that was like my favorite neighborhood ever because it was so walkable. The rent was cheap. There was things everywhere to do. The Taco Bell Cantina was across the street. The Keels was right there.
Yeah.
Like there was everything there. And even now, I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before, but I was looking for an apartment a few months ago, and that apartment that I lived in was on the market. When I rented it from 2021 to 2022, it was $2,000. It was 2 bedrooms, 1 bath,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 750 to 800 square feet. It had a private deck out the back. Pretty standard living condition in Chicago.
Yeah.
$2,000. It's on the market in this past summer, so say August of 2025, IL5, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to live there again. I pulled the unit up, $3,250. Not a single update has been made since I live there.
Yeah.
It is still the same janky washer dryer, unupdated kitchen. It's the same exact unit, but $1,250
Yeah.
more. Like, the whole city has become so just unattainable for me.
Yeah, and you're not alone. Like there's so many people that are being priced out of the city because quite frankly, we're not building enough housing to make it more affordable and lower the
Right.
cost. But the other thing too is, you walk up and down the streets of Lincoln Park, Lakeview, a lot of North Side neighborhoods, and they're having deconversions. So what they're doing is these companies that are backed by private equity and have massive amounts of capital will buy a property that has an existing 2-family or 3-family home,
Mm-hmm.
knock it down, and build a 6,000 square foot single family home on a lot. And that really reduces, number one, the amount of people who can afford a home. It drives it
Right.
up, and it takes housing units out of the city supply. So that is very, very tough for the average person to compete with when
Right.
that's happening up and down blocks all over the city. And that's something that I don't know how you stop that, but that's
Right.
another thing that is exacerbating the city's, housing crisis.
Right. I watched that happen in Westtown. I nannied for a family
Yeah.
throughout college that lived on Erie. And when I started watching them in 2019, they had the nicest house on the block. It was like one of the only single family homes. And the last time I saw them, which was around this time last year, all of a sudden, there's literally all single family new build houses on the block. And I was like, wait, am I in
Yeah.
the right spot? This does not look like the same block that I used to know. It's insane.
Yeah. It's until we do something to curb it, it's not going to stop,
Right.
because the reason they keep doing it is because it makes them money, but it
Right.
drives up prices for everyday people like yourself, like millions of Americans.
Right.
Because this isn't just happening in Chicago. This is happening
Right.
all across the country. This is how we're ending up in this mess. Is big money is getting involved, whether it be in politics, whether it be in real estate, whether it be in whatever it is, up and down the board. You look at this story about youth sports the other day. Did you hear about that one?
I
So
sent
for
it to my boyfriend and I was like, guess our kids aren't playing sports because it's
yeah.
all owned by private equity.
Yeah, so for your listeners who don't know, Chris Murphy, U.S. Senator, was actually at his son's hockey game, and he was getting ready to film it or live stream it. And someone from the facility came up to him and said, "Hey, you can't live stream it, or your son's team is going to get a penalty," because that facility and a lot of facilities across the country are now owned and backed by private equity that are trying to squeeze you for every dollar, because they want you, in this example, they wanted Chris Murphy and everyone else to buy their $50 per month streaming service so that way they could, increase their bottom line.
Right.
And quite frankly, who pays at the end of the day? We do. So
Right.
there's got to be a better way. And quite frankly, our elected officials who allowed it to get to this place aren't going to be the ones to solve it.
So let's move on to healthcare. You have said that healthcare should be a human right, not a profit center. What would a fair and functional system actually look like in practice to you? And how would you build support for that in a Congress as divided as this one? Choosing my words carefully.
Yeah. So honestly, I actually think that Democrats need to realize there's no working with the Republican Party right now, especially while Donald Trump and MAGA have their fangs deep in the Republicans. So you almost have to drag them kicking and screaming to the left to pass some of these policies. And I don't think Democrats in Congress realize that. So when we look at that approach to healthcare, like what does that look like? I think Medicare for all, universal health care, where as an American, or quite frankly, in my opinion, anyone can walk into an emergency room, can help, if something's happening, you need to get seen. If there's a $5 copay or an administrative $5 fee every time I go in, just part of it, whatever. But I'm not racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical debt just to get treatment. For a lot of families where a family member gets cancer, like that's not necessarily death sentence to the family member because they have access to treatment, but the cost of it is astronomical. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of treatment for the
Right.
average person. Now, when you look at countries in Europe that provide universal health care, like my wife's an American citizen. She was born here. Her and her family, before we started dating, were over in Switzerland, and she got food poisoning. She got sick. She had to go to the emergency room. It cost her $35 to get seen. And like quite frankly, like because government is making like again, government's job is to take care of their citizens. If we want people to be productive members of society, working, paying taxes, contributing, having children, bringing in the next generations, we have to invest in them and making sure that people can go see a doctor if they're sick, can go get the medical treatment they need and not go broke or go into massive amounts of debt is the number one way that we have to do it. You could fund it with a progressive tax. Obviously, the government would have to subsidize part of it. But again, we have trillions of dollars to fund these forever wars. How don't we have money to take care of the people here? Donald Trump ran on America first, but yet where's his health care plan? Where's his child care plan? Where's his plan to address the cost of living? I'm going to ask the Democrats the same thing. Where's your plan? What are you going to do?
Right.
Because quite frankly, our elected officials, they may say that they're going to address it, but where's your plan? You've been there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Why have you not addressed it yet? Why are you not out there championing this every single day? And that's where I think that the party needs to be moving forward. And these are healthcare, childcare, paid family leave, funding Social Security, climate change. These are all things that's like, hey, we're going to invest in things that are not only going to make your life better, but they're going to save you money and they're going to make you happy. That's
Right.
what we're going to do. That's the party that we're going to be.
Right. There's nothing that irks me more around the discourse about why is the birth rate falling? It irks me so much because I'm like, why would somebody have a kid? Costs are up. Everything is so expensive. I am 26 living in my mother's house. I didn't want that to happen. I don't want to live like this, but I'm 26 living in my mother's house. Healthcare costs are up. People are struggling to find jobs. Why would you bring a kid into that when everything feels like it's falling apart, like you've just explained? It's impossible for people to prosper, for citizens to prosper.
Yeah. And I'm not age shaming, but this is in part due to kind of the world that you live in. But when you talk about let's look at baby boomers. They came into the world in, the 40s to the 60s, whatever the exact years are. Well, we had just passed the GI Bill and made massive investments in housing. We're 25 years into Social Security. We've expanded Medicaid. We're making massive investments in, we built the highway interstate system. Those are massive investments that for a large portion of their life and kept costs down. They were able to work for minimum wage and still afford to go to college. And then somewhere between 1970 and the end of Reagan is where kind of everything blew up. And now that's kind of where we've reached this hyperinflation where things have become way too unaffordable. And a lot of our elected officials who fall into that umbrella have never understood what it's like to not know if your car is going to get declined while trying to buy groceries. I have. I made $16,000 my first year out of college. I was living in Boston. That's no money. So these are things where we need elected officials who can relate to what people are going through and can address it. And we need to make another, a New Deal 2.0. A deal for the 21st century is how Democrats need to phrase it. How are we going to invest in housing? How are we going to address homelessness? 800,000 people sleeping on the street every night, 30,000 of whom are veterans who fought for our country. And we don't have the decency as a country to provide them guaranteed housing and healthcare when they come back, protecting, us and fighting abroad. Childcare, child. I could just go down the whole list, but it's these are the things we have to do. Our world has evolved from where it was in 1950 and 1960. This is where we are now. We have new problems. We have to solve them, or it is going to be the downfall of this country.
I think it was AOC who had told the story. Might have to fact check that, but one of the Democrat representatives had told the story about talking with a group of other Congress people, and somebody turned to her and was like, I don't get it. Why can't people just take out a loan to get their groceries?
Oh my God.
I want to say it was her that told that. One of the Democratic Congress people told that story, and I was so stunned And whoever told the story was just like that, like people are so out of touch in Congress that like
That
they truly have no idea what it means to buy groceries and worry that your card is going to decline. Their first
that's
thought is, oh, I'll just go. Why don't people
yeah.
just go to the bank and get a little payday loan? What?
I mean, what do you expect? 50% of Congress is millionaires. Like that's
Right.
the thing. They are the average American worker makes somewhere between 1.7 and $2 million over their lifetime. That's the average worker. So in Congress, we have several Congress people who are worth over $100 million. Some are worth over 50 million. Like that again, that's not normal. They do not live a normal life. And whoever that congresswoman said that to, if she said it to AOC, kudos to her because I would have been like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like I would have just put them on full blast because it's like, how stupid are you? You know? And it's
Yeah.
like we like think about it. Like you ever go to get a car, you got to take out a loan. You have to get financing. You want to do that for groceries?
Right.
What?
Right.
Are you kidding me? Payday loans are 100%, 200%, 300%, depending on the ones you get. Like that's what we are talking about for a loan for groceries. It would be a payday loan. So
Right.
now I got to take out $100 loan that next week costs me 200, and then keeps compounding, and then I'm in debt I can't get out of.
Right. Absolutely. So let's move on to foreign policy. You have been very outspoken about the ongoing crisis in Gaza. In your ideal world, what role do you believe the US should play in ending the violence and maintaining peace? And what does a just foreign policy look like to you?
Yeah. So when we look at the genocide in Gaza, I think that anyone who continues at this point to support Israel does not deserve to stay in office. And I've spoken to some of my friends who are Jewish. Some are obviously have the same viewpoint as me. Some have the opposing viewpoint. And I've heard from a lot of people, including some of them, that it's Netanyahu, and it's quite frankly, Netanyahu is a terrible, terrible person. He's been trying to goad us into fighting wars for him
Right.
for decades. But it's not just him. Like the overwhelming percentage of Israel's population supports what they're doing. Like I believe it's somewhere between 55 and 60%. It might even be a little bit higher. Yoav Gallant has a arrest warrant from the ICC. Like his cabinet members are openly genocidal and talking about ethnically cleansing the entire Gaza Strip. So what does the U.S. need to do? Well, the two-state solution in my mind is just an absolute pipe dream. Like it's a one-state solution. Like that's what it is. It is a
Right.
one-state solution. It's a right of return for the people who have had their land stolen from them for decades, who have lived under illegal occupation, as said so from the United Nations, who live under an apartheid state. And there needs to be serious repercussions for the deaths that have been caused. And if the ICC issues arrest warrants for additional members of the Israeli cabinet, we have to support that. If they want to issue arrest warrants for Joe Biden, Anthony Blinken, Donald Trump, and Marco Rubio, we have to support that. Like in my mind, they are all war criminals and they need to be punished justly. Now, moving forward, what does that mean? Like we need to absolutely condition all aid, not just to Israel, but to every other country that we are providing aid to. I think we need to reduce the amount of aid that we send all across the globe. Quite frankly, we need to make sure that we still have relationships. We support the people that need it. But we just spent 45 minutes, you and I, talking about the issues that we have here at home. If we don't address some issues here and use some of the money that we're sending to fund a genocide to help address the cost of living, to help address housing, then we're not, again, this is where America is going to falter and really
Right.
struggle moving forward. So I think that we need, like I said, condition all aid moving forward for every single country. I think we need to hold those who commit war crimes, not just in Israel, but in Sudan. There's a genocide happening there as well, accountable. Like we need to join the ICC. We need to sign the Rome Treaty. Like we need to not just say the right things, but we need to start taking actions to do it. And I would fully support whichever president is in office if they were saying we're going to join the Rome Treaty, because that is a step in the right direction that we need to take.
Right. That is, I remember learning about that when I was in my like college political science classes, that like we're not part of the ICC, and I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like
Yeah.
it's, and I mean, I guess it goes hand in hand with the fact that we as a country right now under Donald Trump are kind of retreating from most things. So
Yeah.
is now going to be the time to join the ICC? No. But I agree, it is something that should absolutely be done in the future.
Yeah, and quite frankly, if we were a member of the ICC from inception, we'll call it around the year 2000. I apologize, I forget the exact year. But we're talking about there would be U.S. soldiers tried for war crimes committed in Afghanistan and Iraq. George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. By the way, like if they're going to be charged for war crimes, good riddance. Go share a cell at The Hague. Like seriously. Like I am not going to be someone who's like, no, we shouldn't. No, no, no. You committed war crimes. You need to pay for what you've done.
Right. Right. Absolutely. If the evidence is there to support it, like I don't.
Yeah.
It's not like this is another thing that like really irks me about discourse going on right now. It's like Republicans that are like, well, if Democrats are on the Epstein list, like they're just going to cover it up. No. If Bill Clinton's on the list, good riddance. Like, sorry if you break the law.
I gotta throw out my Clinton hat, my Clinton blanket, my Clinton sweatshirt, my coffee mugs. It's like, give me a break, man. It's like I am someone who wants to like completely turn the page from the entire Democratic Party of old. Like, I do not want to see at the next DNC convention ahead of the 2020 election, if we have one. I do not want to see Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton anywhere near that stage.
Right.
Like they are part of the establishment that everyone hates, that wouldn't push for the change that we needed, and we can't be the party that holds ourselves to a moral superiority when we're trotting out there someone who potentially was in the Epstein files, for example.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, 40% of this country is always going to vote Republican and 40% is always going to vote Democrat. It's that middle 20% you need to get through to the swing voters to win a national election. And if you are trotting out there the same players of old that you continue to lose election after election on, and that a lot of people that consider themselves swing voters aren't able to tell the difference between a Republican and a Democrat, you're not going to win.
Right.
And that's where it's like, we need to turn the page forward. We need to give people a vision. And if that means shutting the door on the party of old, so be it. It's a new time. We need to move forward. And that includes voting out all the representatives who've been there, who fund the genocide, take money from corporations and pass. Like, these are small changes that will lead to big results.
Right. Absolutely. So let's move on to immigration. Your district is a little bit in the city of Chicago. The Broadview facility, which is not in the city of Chicago, but it's right outside of it, has been a huge issue for months now. It's constantly on the news. How would you reform the system to balance security, but also have some sort of compassion and, a focus on human rights? Like, what is your ideal solution to this?
So when we look at immigration, like, I think the number one thing that we have to do is the easiest sell to the American people. Put forward legislation that provides a path to citizenship to the people that have been here, the people that work in kitchens, schools, hospitals, hotels, restaurants, you name it. Like, they need to be here. The children who were born here, they need to be given a path to citizenship. They pay taxes. They pay Social Security taxes to people who are working. They pay all these taxes into these social systems, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, that they don't even qualify for. And they are glad to do it because they want a better life for them and their family. Well, let's give it to them. Let's say, you've been here for 5 years, whatever the time frame is, you've worked, you've contributed to your community, you're a coach of your kids' little league, like whatever it is. You got to be given opportunities, and we need to do it. We need to fund the immigration courts, ensure that there are enough judges so we can get these hearings heard and we can get people through. Now, when it comes to the enforcement of immigration, I actually take that as like kind of a separate issue, because that's where I think a lot of the differences between Republicans and Democrats come into play. When you look at, I'm someone who supports completely abolishing ICE. Since they came in the early 21st century, they've just been a disaster. I believe it's 14 or 15 people have died in their custody this year. Obviously, with Trump and Republicans in charge, there's going to be no oversight. But at the shutdown, Democrats had a legitimate chance to get some concessions out of Republicans. And they caved for nothing. In my mind, the non-negotiables would have been ACA subsidies, full reinstatement of SNAP benefits, and then legitimate reform into ICE. We're going to make sure that you can set up like a panel where, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and we're going to hold hearings. They cannot be denied any single entry into any facility at any point in time. which is what happened at Broadview. We were the congressional members were denied entry until yesterday or Monday when Lauren Underwood, a congresswoman from the area, was finally allowed in. And there were no inmates there. They moved everyone out when she was coming. They said that they were, yeah. So
Oh my
these are
God,
things.
I never even, that's insane. I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, I saw a clip of her giving like a press conference after outside the facility. And we've all read the reports of these human rights
Right.
attorneys and immigration attorneys who were actually able to gain entry into there to see their clients, which is very few, but inhumane conditions, like these are things that absolutely cannot be happening. I think Democrats need to show some teeth here. I think we absolutely need to go after criminal prosecution for members of the administration who knew that they were, forcing people to live in inhumane conditions, quite frankly, subject to torture, however you want to phrase it. We need to go after them. We also need to actually go after the private prisons. Another easy sell, in my opinion. If you can't win that argument to say we're going to cancel all contracts with private prison facilities, you shouldn't be in office. Like if you can't make that argument successfully to the American people, that's one. I think they need to even go a step further, because a lot of these private prisons that Congress was denied entry to in New Jersey, here in Illinois, all across the country, not only go after their federal contracts, but go after the executives. Like, hey, man, you saw publicly on the news months ago that they were breaking the law. So we're going to make you incredibly radioactive. You can continue to work, but you're never going to work for a company that has a government contract ever again. Any employer you ever work for will be banned from receiving a federal contract. So kind of be like, hey, man, you knew what you were getting into. You're going to pay the price now. And I think that there needs to be legitimate investigations into the people that ICE are hiring, these agents. And the reason I say that very free, like in quotes, is because they're not. Like, let's be honest. In Trump's first term, we couldn't stop hearing about the Proud Boys and all
I'm
these
happy
white
you're going to go
supremacist
there
groups.
because I was going to
Where
keep
are
my
they?
mouth shut on
Where
this.
are they? Wow,
Mhm.
$50,000 bonuses. ICE all of a sudden is a super police force, secret police force, and we haven't heard a peep from these neo-Nazi white supremacist groups.
Yep,
I mean,
that is one conspiracy theory that I can get behind. Like I'm
not a big conspiracy theorist, but that's one. It's like it makes too much sense to be false.
And I wish that our media was adequately funded, because I'm sure somewhere there is an underfunded investigative journalist that would love to dig into this that doesn't get to, because it's the Trump administration and there's no money in media anymore.
Well, let's be clear also too. Media is not the one that's going to do it. When I say media, I'm referring to the ones we're thinking of: Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, down the list. Like, quite frankly, Trump cut their taxes, so they're going to do what he says because they want those high tax rates. They don't want to lose their broadcast fees. And like, even ABC, like they were 100% right when they were fighting for George Stephanopoulos, and they caved and paid that. And it's like, oh, they only care about their money. So it would have to be like independent investigators like Drop Site News, Ken Klippenstein, like anyone else. You go down the list, a lot of these names that we're seeing prevalent on social media and on the internet, like those are the ones who would have to actually be able to do it.
Right. Did you see that? This was an article maybe last year about the guy that infiltrated the white supremacist group in like Utah. He was like a gay man, and he successfully like infiltrated it and then wrote this whole like blog and news post. But we need one of those.
Yeah. I did see that. I do forget the details, but I do remember seeing that and just being like, this is absolutely crazy.
Well, in his post, because he was just like a free agent, like he wasn't tied to any news organization, like in the post he was like, fuck you guys, like you guys let like a gay man infiltrate your like white supremacist anti-gay like hate group, like nice going, like guess you can't suss him out as well as you thought that you could.
Yeah,
it was a great read.
I'll have to go back and reread it then.
I know, me too. All right, let's start to close up a little bit and get a little bit more hopeful. It's been a little down in the dumps with the policy talk.
Yeah.
Let's start with, what moments from talking to voters remind you why you're doing this? Like, what of those moments is giving you hope and the push to keep going?
Honestly, it's been the reception from people that I've talked to. I would say on two hands, I can count the number of people who were like, I'm good. Like, I'm good with the system that we currently have. And, That to me shows that people want change and people are looking for something better and something different. So to know that there's a huge opportunity for me and it's quite simply up to me to make the most of it, that's something where it's like, that's all you could ever ask for in life is opportunity. And I know lots of people are not given this chance. So I have to take every single moment for granted and make sure that when I'm out there, not only am I continuing to be myself and talk about the issues, but I'm actually listening to the people. Because that's the most important thing to me is we go back to the men for others. When I'm fortunate enough to represent this district and sworn in 2027, I need to remember the people who put me there, not the donors who funded me and the corporations and the PACs, because we're not taking money from them. I need to make sure that I am a representative for the people and not a politician. The moment your representative becomes a politician is the moment you need to vote them out. And that's when they waffle on answers. They don't give you a straight yes or no. You need someone who is honest with you and who will give you the answer, not quite frankly that you want, but the answer you're asking for, or the answer to the question you're asking.
Right. And when you think about the future and our generation that is starting to inherit the political system that frankly has been so effed up by the boomers before us, is there anything that gives you hope that change is possible?
I mean, New York City is a big one. I grew up in New York City, seeing Zohran Mamdani win, which I remember being in New York during 9/11, and 25 years later, a Muslim candidate who immigrated here from Africa is the mayor of the city. Like, that's a great thing. That's so awesome. Like, that just goes to speak. That is the American dream. Like, people don't
Right.
want to admit that. Someone immigrated here and ran for public office for a better life, not just for himself, but he's going to fight for the things that people want. His whole campaign also, like, he ran on what he thought were his issues, but as he went through, he listened to people. It's like, oh, you think life is too expensive? Great. I'm going to freeze the rent. I'm going to make buses free. I'm going to give free childcare and just go down the list. And all of his policy, you don't have access to enough groceries or cost too much. Okay, we're going to open 5 city-owned grocery stores. Like, these are common sense solutions that we just need more of. And we need someone who is truly passionate about working for the people that you're going to represent. And
Right.
that was just so reassuring to see that. So just knowing that we're not alone in this. It's very easy during a campaign when you're making calls or you're, by yourself, whatever it may be, to kind of get in your head. But you always have to remember that we're not alone in this. There's a lot of people who feel the same way, who think the same way. And that gives me hope that if we get just enough of those people in office and get the old guard out, the establishment out that doesn't want to change a thing, then we are set up right for the future.
Right. That, and then this is only in the last couple of days, that group of senators that like banded together against Chuck Schumer and was like,
Yeah.
stop trying to fund more establishment people to come into the Senate.
Yeah. I,
That was another
I
one that I was like, you know what, fine, I'll give it a golf clap.
I grew up in New York City. I actually went to elementary school with Chuck Schumer's daughters. And I remember like my mom, my dad, and their friends and everyone just complaining about him being an out of touch politician in 1998, 2000. And here we
Yeah.
are 26, 25, 26 years later. Nothing's changed.
Yeah. I have literally been, up until this year, I have been literally represented by the same exact people my entire life.
Yeah.
My senator has remained the same. It has always been Dick Durbin. And my
Disappointing
representative
end.
has remained the same. It has always been Jan Schakowsky. That is insane. I am literally the embodiment by age of Jan Schakowsky's political career. That is nuts.
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen.
No, and I'm a big proponent of age limits and term limits. Look, we make people retire. Like, one of the things that you brought up, the Democrats calling out um, Chuck Schumer, like, that's leadership. No offense. Like, people may disagree, like, oh, that's like, causing a disruption. Like, no, that's leadership. Calling out ineffective leadership is leading by example. That's
Right.
what you have to do at times. It's like, hey, man, I played sports growing up. Sometimes you get in the locker room, it's like, you suck today. Like, you need to be better. And guess what? Sometimes it's pointed in my direction. And I know
Right.
when it is, they're not wrong. So
Right.
so that is something that, quite frankly, the party needs more of. Something that they're unafraid to call out. Getting back to your example too, like, we absolutely need term limits. Like I think 12 years, which equals 2 terms of 6 years in the Senate, 6 years of 2 terms in the House. If we went even shorter, fine, like 8 years. I don't care. It's not like we just need
Right.
to get more people in there, because the more that we get actual competition, we get fresh ideas, we get open seats, we get primary challenges, it makes the party better. It makes
Right.
you actually represent the voters of your district and not just the people who donate to your campaign. Over
Right.
75% of Democratic voters want to stop funding the genocide in Gaza, yet almost 80% of elected Democratic officials want to continue it. Why?
Right.
Because
Right.
of their donors. That's why. They just want to stay in office. So again, it goes back to money in politics, but yes, we also need more turnover. We need age limits. Force airline pilots to retire at 65. In my opinion, if you can no longer delay your Social Security payments, which is age 70, you should no longer be eligible to sit in office.
Uh-huh. That's
You're
actually a
sorry,
pretty good line to draw.
sorry, you're good, man. Like, thank you for your service. Time for a new generation. And let's be honest, like, there is statistical scientific evidence that from ages 70 to 75, like, your mental capacity decreases. Like,
Right.
you get older. You're not the same person, and you're not in as good a shape as you were at 60 or 55. Like, there's a lot riding on this. This is
Right.
not a game. We need to actually take this seriously and say, hey, man, and look, we saw Joe Biden age in front of our own eyes. Donald Trump is doing it right now. And nobody seems to want to talk about the elephant in the room.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I think we also need to address moving forward.
All right, one last question for
Sure.
you. What is your go-to restaurant in Illinois' 5th district? And because of the shape of the district, I'm going to need one suburban and one city.
Okay. In the city, it's got to be Armitage Jailhouse. Like, I think that is probably one of the better ones. I don't understand it's a little fancier. It's but the sticky date cake, I have a sweet tooth, and that dessert is just out of this world. Okay. So I forget the name of it, but I one of my old jobs, I worked out in Schaumburg, and my boss was from Palatine, and he would take us to this ramen spot out there, and I forget the
Okay.
name of it, but we would go like twice a week for lunch, and it was just it was like, especially in the winter, you want something
Yeah.
warm.
Yeah.
That's that addictive. I will say this though, my wife and I's favorite restaurant is Publican in the West Loop. It's not in the district, but that's where we got married. We got married at City Hall. We did the dinner there. Like, that is our
Yeah.
number one go-to is Publican. But in the district, we're gonna have to go Armitage Jailhouse.
Armitage Jailhouse is always good. Like I said, I
Yeah.
lived in Armitage. I think it was like 2 or 3 blocks from it.
Yeah,
So good.
it's the
All right,
best.
well, that is all I have for you. Do you feel like there's anything else that I missed?
No, I just want to thank you so much for your time, Paige. And for anybody who's
course.
looking to get involved with our campaign, go to mattconroyforcongress.com. You can sign up to volunteer. We have links to donate. Check out all of our issues. But most importantly, we actually have on our website a voting resources page. So if you need more information on polling locations, getting registered to vote, checking your registration, we have all those links on there. All of our social links linked to our Substack right on that page as well. Again, it's mattconroyforcongress.com.
Perfect. And I will link that in the show notes so it is very accessible for everybody. And yeah, that is it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you again for having me, Paige.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I am so excited after talking to Matt. Again, all these candidates just make me feel so hopeful for what could become of the future. And I understand not all of them will win, but there are so many passionate people out there, and all of them deserve to have their voices heard. Now, if you live in Illinois' 5th district, which includes Lincoln Park and the Wrigleyville area and parts of Irving Park, and also suburbs such as Arlington Heights, Des Plaines, Palatine, Mount Prospect, please consider voting for him and spreading the word about his candidacy. And if you don't live in the district and would like to help in some other way, as Matt mentioned at the end of the episode, you can go to his website to learn more about the campaign. You can donate, you can volunteer. There are so many ways that you can help if you don't live in the district. I will see you guys next week, where we will have our 3rd of 4 candidate episodes. And that's about it. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information, preferably somebody in Illinois' 5th District. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Additionally, if you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe to my Substack, which is linked in the show notes as well. Or you can look it up on Substack at She Knows the Score. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and don't forget to be a man or woman for others. I will see you guys next week.